focus on the fact that the world in which you've been placed, the day in which you've been placed, the family in which you've been placed is all miraculous. It's all phenomenal. It's all spoken from nothing by its infinite creator God. And just become alert to it, become aware of it, turn on your nerve endings to exist in that and be changed.
Met a ghost of a king on the road when I first fell. Fire burning to my knees I fell. Met a ghost of a king on the road.
Here we are.
I'd like to say right now that I apologize for Brian Cole's behavior in delaying this episode so long with the flu and other things.
Just being generally ill, ill at ease.
Yeah, just being sickening.
This is the first recorded SASF of 2024, and
is it really?
Which is a long break. Our people think we died, but
what a great time we had off. Doesn't feel like any time off at all.
It's kind of surprising that it. Yes, you're right. It actually is weeks off, but I think they felt like weeks full of work.
Yeah, it went fast in like the worst way. So, but we're here now.
And I think it's good to always
stop complaining. We're here.
I think it's good to start 2024 with looking back at 2023. And
you think so? I would also like to say that I think we confirmed that we don't need to do this often. I didn't hear anything from anybody.
Oh, I heard from people.
Oh, okay.
I think people just know that complaining to you won't do anything.
Okay, fine. Okay, fine. We'll keep up the weekly pace.
Anything that makes us do less SAS, people will complain.
So we will try for another one next Monday, I guess.
I think so. That's the schedule.
We're aiming back at the weekly thing. We're not changing our minds and deciding to do quarterly.
No, we actually really, really like the weekly schedule.
Okay.
Anyways.
Weekly schedule it is. What are we talking about, Brian?
We're talking about
SASFA number 1.
I mean, we're going to start off the year with a softball of a question.
Uh-oh.
Here's the softball of a question. It's from Ryan. I don't know which Ryan. One of you Ryans. One of the themes that pops up in SASF is being an interesting character, but most, perhaps all, of the characters we think of or think are interesting lead abnormal lives. He lists King David and then Cyrus and Antigone Smith, which is a nice juxtaposition. How do normal people be interesting / great characters? And I think that, is kind of it really is the banner topic of SASF. It's what stories are soul food means. It's a challenge at the heart of what you've been saying, Nate. How can you be interesting if you're not Cyrus Smith? I think this actually is a question that we'd darn sure better have an answer for.
Really?
Because
should I let you try first?
Yeah, you should. Let me try.
Okay, try. Go.
Okay. I think that you're actually selling, Ryan, I don't know anything about you. You're selling yourself short. We've all been put in some very interesting times, both with your kids, when you have the emergency, I don't know. These are not super exciting things to read about, but when my tire blows out in 0-degree weather, how do I handle it? That's what happened with me while we were not podcasting.
That's why we didn't podcast.
I was like, Nate, I won't be podcasting. And then, and then I think we've also got massive government overreach. We have COVID, we have war, we have politics, we have church fights. We have all the stuff that you need for perhaps not fighting trans mortals like Cyrus did. But it does seem like we all have the ingredients to be interesting where we are, whether or not we're actually King David killing Philistines. I think there's a bit of fantasy in that question. You'd have to have a sword in your hand in order to be interesting. And I don't know that that's true.
Well, here's my question. Why aren't you more like King David? Like, what? I mean, sure, be more interesting. I'm a big supporter of go ahead, be more interesting, be more like King David. Like,
so you just swallow it and be like, yeah, it's an indictment that you're not interesting. It's an indictment
of you if you're not interesting.
Yeah.
And you should not, I will say this, find yourself particularly interesting. That is important.
Okay, so that's actually a sign of health for Ryan.
So I would say that it's not a sign of ill health that you don't find yourself interesting. That's that's great, Ryan. Way to go. Way to not find yourself particularly interesting. However, you should become more interesting. If you're genuinely not, you should become more interesting. And you should try to be more like King David. You should try to be more like the Apostle Paul. You should try to be more like Christ, ultimately. And that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Just that journey of trying to become more, trying to become more like is great. But I would say, yeah, try to be more interesting, but also realize that the first step to being interesting is being interested. Somebody who's genuinely interested in the world around them is not boring to be around.
Yeah.
They are interesting characters. They are fun to be with. They know stuff. They see stuff. They notice what's happening around them way more than other people do. And being with them and having them point stuff out and having them know things is riveting.
Yeah.
So I love being around people who are highly informed about obscure stuff. I love being around people who can tell me what kind of rock this is, who can tell me what kind of tree this is, can tell me how fast it grows, can tell me where the biggest tree is. Like, to be interested makes you more interesting.
Yeah.
So if you know that flowers pull a negative charge out of the ground with their root system, and that bees have a positive charge, and
so they like
they
magnet together.
They literally attract like a magnet to a fridge, and that there's actually a frequency that's going on around a flower that we would have to use really, really delicate instrumentation to even hear and play. And it's this, there's this tone, and that changes as the bee flies around it, and it varies. And then when the bee flies into the flower, I can't remember which BBC thing this is from, but Attenborough talks about this in one of his videos. The bee flies into the flower, it silences it. Like, the two offset perfectly. The pollen jumps onto the bee, like, because it's negatively charged and the bee is positively charged. And when the bee leaves, she leaves the flower silent.
I see. I've wondered this because observing bees, which is something I did a lot as a child.
Yeah.
They don't go to the same flower twice. No. They just, and yet they can hit a whole cluster in an order that doesn't seem to make sense. Yep. But they don't go to the same twice.
So the next bee, a bee flying around can know by sound and also by magnetic pole which one has not been collected and which one has just been collected. And so, as long as there's more charge left, there's more positivity can arrive, more bee can come. And they leave the flower silent. And so it has to build up its charge again to attract the next bee.
Wow.
And the idea of this having happened by accident is, of course, utterly ludicrous.
One flower started singing, but it was tone deaf, and flowers didn't exist.
Just even walking through your day, I don't care where you are in the world. You could be in Cleveland. And I'm going to say this for all you Clevelanders, without any desire to be insulting. Cincinnati's close for me, but they put chili on spaghetti for unknown reasons, and so there's a little bit more interest there. But
the skyline chili.
Cleveland is one of the least interesting places that there is.
Here's to you, LeBron James.
Yeah, Cleveland's just not interesting. Even there, yea, verily, in Cleveland, you live in a fantasy world. It's insane. Everything's insane. And if you wake up to it and you pay attention to it and you come alive to what God's actually doing around you all the time, it makes you more interesting because you are more interested. And you begin to live in the world as it is, in the world that's really the one God made, and you behave differently. You carry yourself differently. You laugh differently. You love differently. You mediate reality for your children differently.
Yeah.
You buy more puppies and more lizards. You do things like this. We recently had our son brought a friend, a great guy, visited our house, and all we heard afterwards is our son said, "Yeah," he said it was like it was visiting was like being in the movie Meet the Robinsons. And which made us laugh because we're like, what are you talking about? We're totally normal, except for the giant African tortoise in its own shed, our crazy, like, gregarious, fun Jewish grandfather who's ready to regale you with tales of almost dying in Beirut or his time in Kurdistan or whatever, or when he showed NBA Hall of Famer how to buy drugs in Tijuana. Or when he had to take over his brother's drug dealing operation while his brother did jail time. Just, like that. He was just ready with stories. And then there's the whole conversion story and everything else.
We'll let you listeners decide which went where.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, the point is, if you are interested and you're interested in the world God's given you, and you're interested in the day God has given you, you're interested in the weather God has given you, you become more interesting.
Yeah,
you just do. And people can call it eccentric because it is, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you are, by virtue of your interest, more interesting.
I think too, as parents, you get a massive head start on this because your kids think you're interesting for so long.
Yeah, yes.
Without even to argue, if there's an argument to the contrary to be made, your kids are ready to learn whatever you find exciting or interesting. From a very young age, and you don't have to squander that opportunity.
Yeah, you don't have to let them discover frogs and snails and everything else through everybody else in the world. You can be that mediator of this crazy, fantastical reality.
And even if you have one of those jobs that you struggle to explain to other people, figure out how to explain it to your kids. So your kids aren't some of those that I've met who've been like, I don't know what my parents do. Yeah, that's always a little crazy to me.
Yep.
But you talking about that reminds me of, some of my favorite science texts I've ever read. They're all from the 1800s because it's like Faber's Book of Insects, where this is clearly a weird guy, but he just sat around watching insects and would write a chapter on a particular insect in its entire life and how it interacted with his backyard. I assume he's a gentleman farmer. Who knows?
Yeah.
But that ability to actually channel interest in something tiny and bizarre.
To stop and watch.
Yeah.
I can tell you about the time I watched a fly give live birth while having a mantis eat its head off.
I can tell you about the time I put a sweat bee in a cat spider's web and it stung the spider. And so then the spider went and cut it loose. It was like, this guy is too big for me. Went and cut it out of the web. And I still remember the spurt of juice from the spider when it got stung. It was crazy all around. Those are
the spider's like, thanks a bunch, Brian.
he was like, I didn't want this.
Yeah. But the point is, you have to ask yourself, what's so interesting about David?
Yeah.
Like what was so interesting about him? And ultimately it was his relationship with God. Like his confidence, his absolute confident swagger came from somewhere. And it wasn't from his self-worship. It was from his close relationship with his creator. And like the reason why he shows up as a kid and is like, why has no one killed this giant? Is because of his confidence in God and his relationship with God, not because he thinks he's the world's greatest athlete or something like that. He's not believing in himself. It's his relationship with God that builds him up and up and up.
Yeah.
And so there's no reason why anybody, even in Cleveland, cannot become just wildly interesting because they are a close friend of the creator God and they love his handiwork artistically and at every level in their front yard and in the movements of history. So whether the rhythm and movements of history or in scripture or in that potato bug in your sidewalk crack.
Yeah.
It's like his work is everywhere. And if you're interested in it and you're interested in a relationship with him and interested in knowing him better and better and better, you are not unchanged by that.
Yeah.
Like none of us can do that and just be unchanged.
I do think we have been catechized by the Dos Equis man into what does the world's most interesting man look like. And so there can be a feeling where you think, we tell Ryan, hey, be more interesting, Ryan. He thinks, what, do I need to, fly to Australia every other week or something?
Sure.
And
no, be more interested.
Yeah.
Start by being more interested. And you can turn that up. You should be able to turn that up today.
Yeah.
And start there. And
oftentimes too, just interested in people around you. Yeah. Some of the most interesting people are the kind of people who know the randomest facts about the people in the community.
Yeah, so it just doesn't matter who you're interacting with or who you're around. If you are more interested, like it starts to move the needle. And in Riot and the Dance, we talked about to be bored in this world is to be boring in this world.
Great line. I like that line.
And just focus on that. Like focus on the fact that the world in which you've been placed, the day in which you've been placed, the family in which you've been placed is all miraculous. It's all phenomenal. It's all spoken from nothing by its infinite creator God. And just become alert to it, become aware of it, turn on your nerve endings to exist in that and be changed. You will become ravenous for more, and it makes you a lot more interesting. It makes you more volatile, makes you less predictable. And I mean those both in good ways.
Sure. Sure. Like the Robinsons.
Yeah. Yeah.
It reminds me too of the Chinese curse, to go back to Terry Pratchett.
Yeah. Interesting times.
May you live in interesting times.
Yeah, which we do.
There are worse things than to be slightly, not dealing with Philistines. And what is it? The Amalekites taking your wives and children.
It is also really odd that, I think about what previous generations have lived through, and I think about my own impulse in, the late 80s as a 12-year-old, to wish that I lived in a more volatile time.
Yeah.
A time of adventures. I want to be a hobbit on an adventure. I want to go
I want there to be a world war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you don't. But I think about my grandfather's stories and the normal people in those stories that I would love to meet and question. But there were just glancing blows. That doctor who worked on my grandfather's leg after Guadalcanal, my grandfather's father who worked colored jobs. I don't even know what ethnicity he actually was, but he was really dark and lived in a world in which, he could not get white work, quote unquote. And how much the world has changed, like the weird hardships and tyrannies and oppressions that were going on, even as Germany starts invading Poland and everything else. So my grandfather is home. His dad is plowing victory gardens for people. He ends up fighting a stallion. His stallion rebels in the harness when he's plowing somebody's yard so they can plant produce, to survive the war. And in fighting the stallion, he has a heart attack. And my 15-year-old grandfather has to take over everything.
Wow.
And it's like, well, his dad was a really interesting character. His dad was the one who ended up entering Nebraska in a covered wagon and exiting in a Buick.
There's an upgrade.
There's a lot of story there,
Yeah.
There's a lot of story. And the thing is that we become fascinated with regular people from different times. And just realize that you are one of those regular people in a different time.
Yeah.
So 40 years from now, like people would just be desperate to ask you what it was like. What was it like?
Right. And
what
was
it like? What was it like?
God wouldn't make billions of us if there wasn't something for us to do.
Right. Amen. There's something fruitful for you to do, and there's something fruitful for you to do every single day.
Is it Sir Roger Scruton who says that everyone's a conservative about that which he knows best? I can't remember who it is, but that to me is something that I think is another path to being interesting. Not just being interested, but have something that you know best. Like, when you can get someone going on a topic that they like, don't be a bore. But someone who won't stop talking about a particular thing is often more interesting.
One of the things I loved, he's still alive. So one of the things I currently love about my uncle, Gordon Wilson, is the fact I recognized at a pretty young age that he was an incredible connoisseur of small things.
Yeah.
He was a student of beauty in when you put your milk on your Frosted Flakes.
Okay.
It's like
okay.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter what it was. It could be so trivial, and he would try to find the way to do it best and to love it most. And so when he, describing small beauties and small things, he was the uncle when I was in graduate school who always had glass mugs in the freezer because it was best to pour your beer at the end of the day into this frosted.
Okay. Yeah.
But like the things that cost nothing, the details that cost nothing, the details that were, within reach for anybody, not just for a rich man. He found and perfected and appreciated with just deep love. And so he was never ungrateful. He was never, ever uninterested. He was always interested. He was always really, really specific and targeted in trying to find those things which are best, which God is offering us right here that we could do that would just be a little better, a little more fun.
Yeah.
And then when he did it and he had it that way, he was never without satisfaction and praise and gratitude for it. Whether it was a cheap beer poured into a perfectly frosted mug on a porch in Virginia in the humidity, he just savored it. Every single lightning bug that hung around that porch was deeply appreciated.
Yeah.
It's like when you sat there with that frosted mug, and I really appreciated that about him. It's a great example, because as he got more opportunities, as he was able to go to Sri Lanka, as he was able to go to Africa, as he was able to take his skills in Riot and the Dance off and chase animals that were exotic and strange, when he preached to kids, appreciate your own backyard, love your own backyard, find the monsters and the critters and the amazing magic there first, and then move on. He was no hypocrite. He had done that. This was the arc he was on. And I just really appreciate that about him. So all of us exist here, whipping around a star at, Mach 86. None of us are in a boring world.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no responsibility, no burden to be a boring character.
Yeah.
In a boring world.
Well, this is interesting. This is more down the nature doc path, but I was showing a nature doc to my kids, and my son just really reacted against the bleakness and negativity of the BBC ones.
Yeah.
He just said to me, Dad, I hate how the animals always die.
Yeah.
In every single one of these. And I realized that I tend to just, zone out or tune out all the narrator, because he's just going on and on. And I was realizing that, it is pretty, the BBC definitely has an angle.
Yeah,
and
they
it's
do.
merciless.
Yep.
And it's always, this survives, but this for sure doesn't. And I thought that was pretty interesting, especially compared to Riot and the Dance.
It's also one of the things that bothers me about the BBC is their unwillingness to intervene. Them believing that man does not have any obligation of dominion in a particular moment.
Okay, yeah.
But they do have an obligation of dominion in EU climate change policy.
So they're massive hypocrites.
They have an obligation of dominion over their fellow man, but they don't have an obligation to pull that animal out of the water that's about to drown. That doesn't have to.
Yeah.
They don't have the obligation to
Well,
intervene
the baby
in that way.
elephant who gets turned around in the desert and starts heading back out of the desert, and they're just like, dang, stinks for this animal.
Yep.
And and then they use those moments as clips to help motivate and whip everybody who watches.
Yeah.
So at first I was kind of surprised, because
Also a ton of it's staged.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
So
they're just making it up or making it happen.
The nature of production is such, you look at camera angles and things, it's just like, okay, how many lizards did you throw into the snake pit to capture this one sequence?
Yeah.
Like there's that kind of stuff that they are intervening in other ways, but their view is the nature of truth is you have to communicate something that would happen. It doesn't have to be what did happen. And so they will put together shots from, and this is incidentally, I think some of this is fine. This is not an accusation.
Right.
So, some of this to a certain degree is fine, but they would put together a narrative of like a hawk looking at a rabbit and the rabbit running, and the hawk was shot 2 weeks, away from the rabbit, and the rabbit heard the cameraman and flinched. And, it's like because that's the kind of thing that happens.
Right.
They feel fine presenting it as if it just did and they just captured it.
Sure.
And there's a fine line there.
Right.
There's a very fine line.
Well, I mean, they'll film, you can tell when they're just swapping babies in.
Yeah.
Baby seals or baby penguins, they're tracking a story. There's no way. I mean, sometimes you can tell, but there's no way they're tracking that seal doing all these things.
And other times
20 of them.
Yeah. The one of the things we discovered in being in the field is that it does help if you're the BBC and you can call whatever researchers are there and you're just on the inside and you'd be like, hey, so we need all your radio tagged animals. And so there are a lot of some of these are the same animal because they're radio tracked. And so there's researchers who are already tracking these wild dogs. There's researchers who are already sitting in the field studying them. And so the BBC knows exactly where they are and can follow them to, particular places. If you actually head out and try to track a wild animal, it's pretty difficult.
Right.
And they did, it was by means of this that they actually discovered what zebra camouflage is for, because it's really hard to track a zebra among zebras, right? One particular individual. And so they would tag it. I'm trying to remember. I wish I could provide a footnote for this, but I did not make this up. I need to go find my source. Whenever they tagged the zebra, they do like a little dab of paint, or ear or anything.
Yeah.
That zebra was immediately killed.
Oh wow.
And they discovered that the predators are not hunting the weak and the straggling because they're weak and straggling. They're hunting them because they can be differentiated. And so there's a level of communication that's happening between the predators that they are targeting specific identifiable individuals for attack. And when something's a little bit away from the herd or sick, it is recognizably different and they are all able to target it and take it down. But as soon as they put a little dab of red paint on a really big, healthy zebra,
that's sad.
Then they've marked it for destruction. That one's getting taken out. But anyway, all this to say about the BBC is it is bleak. They are very bleak and despairing.
Yeah.
And yet capture some really gorgeous stuff I love to look at.
Oh, totally.
And I really, really appreciate them. And at the same time, they are the priests of nihilism.
Yeah. And I think my son's he's not emotionally calloused in that way, and so he's definitely picking up on this is
and
not
he shouldn't
good.
be emotionally calloused. Yeah.
Right. And me, I'm just like, I already know there's a bit of drama behind it, and 9 out of 10 predator hunts are going to fail anyway. So it's kind of cool the lion gets to eat, right?
Yeah, lion's got to eat.
Right.
But it is.
I do really like how Riot and the Dance has both addressed the pain and suffering of this is not how it should be, but also the Bible's full of comments about how nature does reflect the glory of God as it is now, even though
I'm rewriting a section of an episode of Riot and the Dance right now, and adding writing to it. It's this lioness hyena interaction, and the hyenas are really interesting because right now in the narration we're talking about how God chose the lion to represent the Lion of Judah, and the lion is represented nobility, and some of this is by choice, but you also try to imagine the hyena of Judah. It's not like God could have just picked anything because he laced it into the design of the animal. There is a nobility in the lion that is in the lines and shape. And demeanor of that lion, the way the lion stands and poses.
Their chill,
it's like,
their chillness. I don't know how to describe
but there
that.
is there is
they
a
do
majesty.
have some majesty.
There is a majesty to it, and there is not a majesty to the hyena. There is a brutal power. There is a devouring. There's a devouring endurance, but it's not a thing that could have just been switched. And it's pretty interesting to see that the design of the animal it's designed for an image and for a metaphor that's going to be used later. And those lions had been existing for a long time before it got used that way. Yeah. And it was the right use. They were designed for it. Sure. So but it is really interesting to see the brokenness as well, like the curse. But God in Job brags about feeding, predators as well. Yeah. And that includes us. So when you sit around your table and thank God for your hamburger, right. Or for the venison your uncle shot, right. Whatever it might have been, just know where you fit.
Yeah. When we were talking through it, that is one thing I was bringing up to him. Like, hey, they're doing something to your emotions because you say when in Harry Potter 5, when the beloved Sirius passes away, that didn't wreck my son the way that this one animal scene did. And we've talked about this before, how kids are much better at, or rather, the emotion of an animal dying is much easier for a child to understand than the emotion of an adult dying.
I think there's like a breaker that trips for little kids with adults, but I also think I don't know that I've said that it's easier for them to handle animal duress and stuff, but I also think there's ways in which it's harder.
Sorry, no. I say the opposite.
Yeah.
You said that it's easier for them to get emotional import out of something happening to an animal.
Correct. Yes.
Than it is for.
Yeah.
for
I was about to retract. I was about to retract
you said
my
the right
previous
thing.
position.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, you said the right thing. Is that
See?
they feel the animal character more than they do the human.
But we can use animal stories to mitigate trauma and drama.
Yeah.
But it hits hard.
Yeah.
It still hits hard. Anyway, it is, as far as Ryan goes in this whole question, get interested. Get interested in your neighbors, get interested in your coworkers, get interested in every fly you ever see.
Yeah.
Know all about the blood bag a fly blows out of its head to get out of its little maggot skin.
What about for those of us, okay, we've already said you have to like creation, right?
Yeah.
But how about perhaps for those who are not so, and I don't know, they're not the creature type. They're more the tech side.
This is not optional.
Blood bags are not optional.
It's not optional. I will say this very dogmatically, if you haven't noticed. If God made it, like you're supposed to appreciate it. If you are made in the image of God, it should be part of your life goal to become more and more like him as much as possible.
Yeah.
And he's pretty interested
right
in all this stuff. He actually put a lot of work into a lot of those snakes and those spiders. And I don't care if you want to plead gender or whatever. You actually have to be amazed and appreciative. Like you don't get to say, I want to skip this entire floor of the museum that God's made for us and stuck us in. Like he's your father. He's your creator. He made all this stuff. You are one of the heirs inheriting all this stuff. You don't get to say, can you only read me the part of the inquest where I get given the things I'm already interested in as opposed to the things he intended to give me? We just don't get to do that. So we are given the world. We have been given the creatures. We all have. The children of God are the collective heirs of all of this, like all of it. So we really should be interested.
Right.
Like we really have to be interested. We don't get to say, don't tell me anything about any of that whole section of the theme park that I'm inheriting. I don't want to know about it. It's like, well, it's wrapped. It has a ribbon on it. It's been handed to you by your father. So look up, open your eyes, say thank you, you ingrate, and open it. It's like we know this about children. Like imagine if, like, and especially it's funny that moms do this because moms are the ones who get wronged this way the most. When moms put a ton of work into something and they present it to their children, and it's just,
the
trampled or ignored, or just, they kind of like they run through it. There could have been, they're not being appreciated for whatever meal or whatever thing.
An exquisite dinner is consumed
exquisite
in
dinner
3 minutes
or
flat.
Or the fact that Johnny has underwear at all, let alone that it's clean. It's like there's like her family's provided for. Her family is clothed and fed and cared for, and she's doing all this. Moms are frequently the ones who are wronged by their children.
Sure, because the kids are being like, actually, I don't care about laundry.
I don't care about anything you do for me.
Right.
I don't thank you when you drive me to school or when you drive me to soccer practice. I don't even think to thank you. I just take. And it's on parents to instruct gratitude in their children. Right. Without being like awful.
Without nagging. Yeah.
Don't you realize what I'm doing for you? It's like, thank me for every soccer practice, but they also need to raise good humans. And so they need to train their kids to be agents of gratitude. They need that. So given that moms are the ones who receive that treatment the most, it is ironic to me that they are generally the greatest offenders in this category towards the creator God. They do the same
here's
thing.
Where the rubber hits
they
the road.
do the same exact thing.
Yeah.
Like, take that mantis away. No, Johnny, I don't want to look at it. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to look at
Yeah.
I don't want to look at the present God gave you. I don't want to look at the present God gave us. I don't want to look at the world, that's being given to us. And it's really unfortunate. I mean, it really, really is. And so you have boring dads who go to work and they're tired And so they feel used up and they come home and they just want to kind of blob and be a beanbag because they just work 9 to 5. You can have that kind of a problem, and a lot of guys do that. They turn off their interest in reality and they turn on football or whatever else.
Sure.
But moms, no, you can't freeze a spider. No, you can't have an insect collection. No, I don't want to see your frog. I don't, And I think many, many mothers, I should say, are fantastic on this front, and they're cutting against the grain when they do it.
Yeah,
it's like they know they are working against their own instincts, but especially with their little kids, they do a great job. I know a ton of mothers who are fantastic in this, but when moms are interested, when moms are amazed, it is so powerful with kids. It's really powerful, and it's one of the greatest ways to teach that gratitude.
That's a great
everywhere
point.
is to be grateful yourself, is to be somebody demonstrating gratitude constantly to your children instead of no. And treating God like he really is this uncouth father who just won't stop it with the bugs. Who won't stop it with
there are so many.
There's so many bugs. Who won't stop it with the bugs and the worms and the moths and all the ants and everything else. And instead of really, really imaging for their children that amazed gratitude, that wonder.
It's also pretty cool how interested you can be without your kids finding out that you wouldn't touch one.
Right.
It could be years before the kids are like, wait, mom won't touch it and she's afraid of it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. My wife recently was like, Dave, our black-headed python, my son's black-headed python. Dave's just having a bad attitude. Like he was like, he tried to bite me when I was giving him water. Like, I just felt bad for Dave because he's so pretty, and like Rory's off at college. Normally he'd be handling him, but I was really cracked up that she had done that. I was really cracked up that she'd gotten into Dave's cage at all,
right?
Because I would not have expected her to do that. Like, I'll do that. That's fine.
Right.
You don't have to be the handler,
right?
Like when Billy is showing you the garter snake that's vomiting up a mouse.
Yeah.
At the moment.
There's no requirement for mom to hold at that point.
Yeah, exactly. You do have to be amazed, but you do not have to say, here, let me hold it.
Right.
That's a little bit different. But it is, in other words, be interested and represent gratitude to your kids in every single way that you possibly can. And you will become more interesting.
Yeah. That's great. Maybe one last question to tag on the end from our global audience.
Great.
This is a question coming from South Africa, where a single guy is asking, "How do you be a good uncle / well, I guess I'm not sure what the best analogy is for this, because he's saying South Africa is a pretty fatherless society.
Yeah.
How do you be an interesting guy when you are not the dad? Like, how do you be a good uncle?"
I think that's the easiest thing in the world.
It doesn't.
I feel like interesting
expeditions.
I feel like interesting uncle is not hard.
It's kind of the sweet spot, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how old the kids are and everything else, but you get to be the guy with the donuts and the adventures. Like that's You get to be the guy where the parents can be really grateful to you because you're at time with you for their kids is time engaged with the world and active and energetic. But it still buys them free time to get something else done.
Right.
Where you're not babysitting them.
Yeah.
You're taking them on adventures. You're being Gandalf.
Yeah. I was grateful for uncles who were like, "Hey, would you like to learn how to drive?" And then, I'm a 12-year-old out on the back roads of Idaho. Well, I guess I shouldn't memorialize
you absolutely should.
Yeah.
My grandfather bought a little dumpy car on his acreage and taught us to drive so young.
Yeah.
And we would just be driving laps out in the pasture, just like we had this little course in this bad little car.
Yeah.
Same thing with a motorcycle. We were out there really young. I've had great uncles on both sides.
Yeah.
So my Uncle Bob was a legend for us growing up. He was just fantastic, really funny, playful, a blast.
Yeah.
And what he did, he was in Colorado. So what he did is he would come up once a summer, rent this little dumpy shack on the lake, and just was like a 5-day party.
Yeah.
Of just like pulling us on tubes and swimming and teaching us to dive and, and all of it, from campfire songs to tubing and everything else. And it was 5 days a year and it mattered a ton. It was huge. And then on the other side, my Uncle Gordon, my Uncle Evan has always been really, really hospitable. My Uncle Gordon is that, like I said, the connoisseur of small things and of creatures. Yeah. And, it's why I'm interested. It's why I am not just in, a guy who reads philosophy and theology and doesn't know anything about the natural world. I'm way more inclined towards natural revelation than I would have been without him because of his pleasure in it.
Yeah, on my dad's side, my uncles are so generous. I feel like I haven't that as an uncle, generosity is something that a kid can really see because they're like, hey, this person owes me nothing. Yep. And yet every time I see them, they have something that they want to give me or show me. And then
generosity and gratitude, those two.
And then on my my mom's side, they're the rednecks. So they're the ones who are like, oh, you're an editor. Would you like to help me catch this bull? And then they watch to see what happens. And that's very valuable too for an uncle. That's prime uncle. It's the other kind.
You're one of
would you like to
those
drive?
types.
Yeah. Would you like to drive this semi? There, you better shift it right. And those kinds of things are awesome. You don't get that experience here. As an editor.
Yeah, as an editor. Yep. So be interested, be grateful, image that, and I would say that as you do that, you'll find that God will put bigger and bigger challenges in front of you just because He's equipping you for them. Because being equipped with gratitude is being equipped for almost everything.
That is true. That it feels to me like when you're reading a book and you start to pick up on a particular theme and you notice the theme everywhere. Yeah. It seems like that happens with life.
Oh, yeah.
In life, you're on a particular way where you're like, hey, I wonder if I can help somebody in need. You know, you help one person. You think I don't know anybody who's in need, but you start pulling a thread. It's like everywhere. Or same thing. Is there a way that I can help little kids get better at sports or something like that? Yeah. Those kinds of threads just pop up. Yep. You kind of got to be careful what you start looking for.
I've never liked Harbaugh, the coach of University of Michigan. Michigan football, not a Harbaugh fan. Was not hoping he'd win the national championship this year. Don't mind his brother, coach of the Ravens, but just never liked him at all. And then I just saw that he was at the March for Life, and there was an interview with him or some quote where he said that the journalist asked, "Is it really true that you tell your football teams if there's ever an unplanned pregnancy, don't ever pay for an abortion? Like, just don't do it. And if you are in that situation, don't do that. Let my wife and I take the kid. We'll take the kid."
Wow.
And saying that to whole football teams, like for your career, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like that's insane. And I was like, man, like what a cool guy. Like I'm officially like
big one in the W call.
I might still root against you as long as you're in the Big Ten, but awesome job. Like what a great character. Like that is a great character moment. That guy saying that.
To how many men has he said that who really needed to hear that?
Yeah. I mean, and how many lives were affected by it. You know, it's like over the years. So anyway, that one, you know, I find that's an example of like
being interesting.
That's just bold faithfulness, right? That is just a bold faithfulness right there. And immediately swung my affections for him radically.
Right.
You know, I could still root against him on the football field, but I've never had a high opinion of that guy at all. And now I do.
Right.
It's like, okay, great. But it's anyway, being a really good uncle is an enormous gift to kids to have that. So more power to you in South Africa. Go for it. And you have like a significant uptick in critters from what we have. So you should be very interesting indeed.
Yeah, totally. Well, first episode of the year.
There, we did it.
Do we have a lamp we need to throw at people yet, or are we going to put that off?
We can kind of put it off. I know we are going to talk about Boys in the Boat.
Yep.
I don't really, the book and the film, I don't really want to have it as a lamp.
Okay.
We might wait till it's out on streaming so everybody can see it. I will recommend Shawshank Redemption.
Wow.
Which I just watched with my kids. It's been on my list for a long time, waiting for filters.
Yeah.
So I have this list of films of things I want to watch with my kids. I watch it with 2 of them. And finally I was like, hey, Clear Play has Shawshank. So we put it in the rotation. They were both shocked by how good it was. It is a really, really good movie.
A great movie.
And it's in simple ways too. So you think about the cinematography of 1917 or some of these other really, really rich films. Same cinematographer did Shawshank. The cinematography is not anything to look down your nose at, even though it's just a prison movie.
Right.
And it's just really, really well done.
It's so good.
It's very good,
Is
and
that
it
our
needs
pick?
filters.
Do we need to do that?
We
One for our
can.
next-
We can do Lamp, but only because it's on Clear Play.
Yeah.
So Lamp, courtesy of Clear Play.
Great. Yeah. One funny story about that one. When I was a young husband, my wife was like, what do you want to watch? She was like, I really want to watch something, kind of a movie with a happy ending. And I was like, oh, Shawshank has a happy ending.
It does have a happy ending.
And I turned it on and she was like, oh, what is this? And, we watched the whole thing. And I was like, well, it had a happy ending. And I don't know.
My best wife pick moment, I may have mentioned before, was we were in the hospital having a baby, and labor was long, and she wanted to watch a movie. And so she wanted, and this is the age of, we had a video store at that time in Moscow, Idaho. There was still a video rental shop on Main Street, really close to the hospital, and which is awesome. Though we had that way longer than most of the world did.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I was really sad when it left. But I ran there. She's like, just something dumb, something like a rom-com or something. And I ran to the video store and I rented this Jennifer Lopez movie without really thinking about it. Didn't pay much mind. Got back really quick, turned it on, and the opening scene, she dies in childbirth.
Oh. That's awesome.
It's like, what did I die? Like, my wife was sitting here laboring, and like, and oh boy,
Scene.
oh boy. It's like, touchdown.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
touchdown. Well done, me. So you picked Shawshank for
The feel good.
Now, I will say, in your defense, totally happy ended.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
well done.
Yeah.
Well done, you. But yeah, Shawshank, we did a back-to-back weekend. One was Friday night, one was Saturday, where we did Chariots of Fire and Shawshank. They'd seen Chariots of Fire before, but a long time before. They'd aged a little bit, so they appreciated it differently. And then Shawshank, and both are examples of pretty exquisite filmmaking, like really, really good filmmaking.
I haven't watched either one for a number of years to get back to it.
So-
I need to show my kids. We could watch Chariots of Fire.
Yeah, so I'll throw Chariots of Fire out there too.
Nice.
So here's what we're going to talk about. Movies upcoming for us to talk about will be Boys in the Boat when that's available. We will talk about Shawshank, and we will talk about Chariots of Fire
There we go.
and happy endings.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Break.
All right, I got 2 things for you. The second thing is that I'm going to show you our new Canon Plus video right after I get out of the way. If you're on audio, then you can listen to the script or view it on our YouTube. And then the first thing is that now through the end of December, you can get a year of Canon Plus and gift it to a friend or an enemy or a family member or both for $59.99 instead of paying $95.88, which is more. You can do that by going to canonpress.com and clicking on the Gift Canon Plus button. But you got to go now, or actually right after you watch this video. Enjoy.
Hey, Christian Dad. Are you paying a monthly fee to let Hollywood producers pump their septic tanks directly into your living room? Even worse, directly into your imagination and the imaginations of your children. How much darkness streams into your home every day, every week? Have you gotten too used to turning your mind off when you put your feet up? Have you invited your own enemies into your home? How much damage has already been done to you and to your family?
My heart says that the way I feel most myself is to go by the name Fred. That's because I'm non-binary.
Canon Plus is building a global platform with one simple goal: to create and deliver great content that will help Christian families grow stronger and more dangerous in the world. Content that will kick your brain's butt and help you bear down and step up. Content that will encourage, equip, educate, challenge, and inspire your family. Content built on the bedrock of real truth, real goodness, not fake trendy virtues,
How dare you!
and real lasting beauty. Your family might already be struggling. Maybe the man of the house has been sipping too much Bud Light Gospel in the basement for too long.
It's day 6 of girlhood!
But it's not too late. With thousands of audiobooks, podcasts, truth-telling documentaries, and curriculum for all ages, Canon Plus wants to help you grow stronger, together with your family. There might be enemies at the gates, but there's a feast on the table to strengthen you for the fight. We want the resources we produce to help you do the real work of cultural change, becoming a lighthouse in your own community, armed with courageous joy and a faith that burns hot and bright, especially when the world would rather keep you on a cute little dimmer switch. We don't have to wallow in the world's filth.
Moonlight, Best Picture.
You are gay.
We don't need to let our strength atrophy like numbed victims of some ungodly matrix, leaving our families unprotected and vulnerable. It's time for Christian fathers to stop being such cultural cuckolds, well-behaved Wonder Bread winners sitting by and paying for the world to assault their families with lies. Let's get strong and grow our families strong. Let's raise our kids to be the world's worst nightmares. Smart, secure, fearless, joyful, difficult to control, and quick to laugh at lies and nonsense. We're pushing back against the rising tide of sewage on our screens. We're pumping out antidotes to the world's poisons. But we can't do it alone. We need allies. You need allies. So consider this your invitation to join up and make things a little awkward for all our weaker brethren in church leadership.
It's not that we're against anything.
Who so badly want to be worldly cool kids. Help us build a streaming platform unlike any other. A platform that will challenge and strengthen Christians, mind, body, and soul, until this cultural tide begins to turn.
She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
And yes, this tide will turn. This ain't the Alamo. We're all gonna die, but we have no intention of losing. Canon Plus. You don't have to subscribe, but you do have to stop sucking.